Welcome to KRQE's New Mexico News Insiders, 2025 Regional Edward R. Murrow Award winner for Best Podcast. Here's Gabrielle Burkhart and Chris McKee.
As 2025 comes to an end, we're looking ahead to some major changes in the metro, but notably another 4-year term for Albuquerque Mayor Tim Keller. He won an unprecedented third straight term in a December runoff election against conservative challenger Darren White. But even with Mayor Keller continuing to lead the city, there's a leader we won't be seeing in the spotlight of this administration next year.
Yeah, that leader is Harold Medina, who is stepping down from his role as the Albuquerque police chief by the end of 2025. He is choosing to move on while Mayor Keller, as Gabby mentioned, heads into that third term. Chief Medina says he made the decision after having a conversation with the mayor ahead of the election and agreeing that no matter the outcome of the mayoral election, so whether or not Keller won, the chief said he was planning to retire at the end of 2025. He made that retirement public in mid-December.
Yeah, so we got a chance to catch up with Chief Medina earlier this month and just ask him about his lengthy and storied career in law enforcement, some of his ups and downs, and what's next for him. He was very candid and even a little emotional in our conversation. Here is our interview with APD Chief Harold Medina. We are here with Albuquerque Police Chief Harold Medina. When this interview hits the airwaves, it'll be the final week of 2025. Chief, thanks for coming on the show with us again. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me here. I've always enjoyed your show and always look forward to being here and talking about a variety of topics over the years.
Thank you.
Yeah, we like giving more context to some of the issues in the community. And you've had a 30-year career in law enforcement. I want to just recap your timeline a little bit for listeners. You graduated from Albuquerque Police's Academy in 1995. After 20 years on the job, retired from APD in 2014, then took on a role as police chief in the Laguna Pueblo. By 2017, you'd come back to APD, eventually stepping into a role as interim police chief in 2020. That became a permanent position when Mayor Tim Keller appointed you chief in 2021, and that kind of brings us up to date. I think it's safe to say, you know, in that 30 years, you've been through ups and downs in your career and with the department, but just looking back, reflecting on the 30-year career you've had in law enforcement, can you identify, like, what are you most proud of?
You know, I think the thing I'm most proud of is our officers. You know, I had breakfast with them today. I started what we call Chief's Breakfast, and once a month I bring in 20 randomly chosen officers who have breakfast, and we ask them first to tell us about themselves, their hobbies, their family, and then the next round around the table is what's the department doing good and what's the department could be better at. And I'll tell you, 5.5 years ago when I took over as chief, that breakfast was brutal. The officers were not happy. They were so upset. A lot of the processes we had in place because of DOJ just truly affected morale. And I see us over the last 2 years, that breakfast, and even today, like there's several officers, they're like, Chief, we're so happy. But I was shocked this morning. The number one thing officers spoke about is they love the upgrade we've made to technology. So just seeing that the officers are happy to be at this department again, see that they're working as hard as they can, and that they do everything they can to keep the city safe and they take pride in their job is probably one of the best things that I've seen that I'm leaving proud of.
So we last had you on the podcast about 1.5 years ago. It was May 2024, as APD was approaching the final stretch of the settlement agreement with the Department of Justice. Going back to the why the DOJ took action, just to remind our listeners, their Civil Rights Division, they announced in 2014 that APD had a, quote, pattern or practice of excessive force that violates the Constitution and federal law. 10 years later, this last May, APD achieved, quote, full and effective compliance with the DOJ, effectively ending, and actually I shouldn't say effectively, literally ending that federal oversight. You openly said you wanted to see that reform process through, and now it is indeed over. What are some of the reform efforts that APD will continue beyond your leadership as chief and beyond that settlement agreement?
You know, we're going to continue to honor the spirit of the settlement agreement. DOJ, I've always said, was here for a reason. There were things we should have done better. There are many parts to this consent decree that people don't realize. There's a portion to make sure we properly investigate use of force and misconduct. There's a portion that makes sure that we have a strong use of force policy. There's a portion that makes sure we train our officers correctly. And there's a portion that talked about community outreach. And when I look back to the struggles of 2011, 12, 13, when the department went sideways with the community, so many of those aspects were at the core of it. People didn't have faith in our ability to investigate ourselves. We had strong relationships with neighborhood associations, but nobody else. So I think we've really grown from that consent decree, and all we're changing are processing parts that are going to make us more efficient and faster that we thought we could have done. But the quality of investigations should remain the same. We're going to continue with the CPCs, and they should always be continued. There's city ordinances laid forward by council that will enable that to continue to happen.
Those are community policing councils, which are basically regions of the city, right, where you've got community members meeting monthly, I think it is.
Yes, monthly with APD. So we're going to continue what we're doing under the settlement agreement, plus some of the stuff that went above and beyond. I think one of the programs that gets overlooked that I started with the police department was the ambassador program. And I always said the ambassador program were the eyes and ears to the community whose voice was never seen or heard by the police department. So we're going to continue the ambassador program. I think it has its value, even looking back on the Muslim shootings. I remember it was a Saturday morning, 6 o'clock, I think, when I got the first call that we had picked up another victim from the Muslim community. And at that point in time, 6:15, 6:20, 6:30, we had talked to U.S. attorneys, we had talked to FBI SACs, we had talked to the DA's office, because we had a good relationship. But the key was we had an established relationship with the Muslim community. And by 9 o'clock that morning, we had plans in motion to help them feel safeguarded as we investigated this case. So the ambassador program sometimes wasn't always viewed as the success that it is because it wasn't part of the consent decree, but it is the number one community building program that we have.
I know people criticized the cost of reform, and they also really criticized the effects on morale, right, that reform created. There were just years of complaints, I think, about officers being, quote, scared to do their job or feeling handcuffed, perhaps, to, all of these rules. Is APD, though, better off 10 years later of reform?
We absolutely are better off. And I think that reform was necessary, but I think the reform processes is where I have issues. And I was very fortunate early on as a deputy chief. I got involved with major city chiefs. And when I became chief of police of the Albuquerque Police Department, I did approach major city chiefs and I said, look, this is wrong. There's no consistency between monitoring teams across the country. And we started a consent decree working group right around 2020. And we actually were able to fight the Department of Justice and the monitors by saying, this process was DOJ approved in Baltimore. Why can't we do it in Albuquerque? And I think that the reform process needs to be reevaluated. And I'm very fortunate, as everybody knows, last year I was elected president of Major City Chiefs, and I got to have conversations with high-level officials in Washington. And one of the things I really urged them to do was look at a reform process in the future that it's going to be important for them to have, but that you got to make sure that those reform processes are consistent with truly best practices and that you work them at a local level. We didn't start gaining traction on this consent decree until me and Mayor had the courage to push back and say, you don't know what's best for Albuquerque. And each community is individually the same. There's no way somebody could compare New Jersey to Albuquerque, New Mexico. And vast majority of our monitors were trying to push practices they had in New Jersey 15 years ago on the Albuquerque Police Department. So I think it is invaluable to have reform processes, but you have to look and make sure that you're working together and not against each other, and that you're truly taking into account the uniqueness of each individual community across this country.
Yeah. We're also approaching 2 years now since the public learned about a major public corruption scandal involving officers from Albuquerque Police, the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office, and New Mexico State Police, who were working with defense attorneys to get DWI cases dismissed for cash. We've talked to you a lot about this scandal on camera, especially in the earlier days as APD was conducting its own internal investigation. We saw officers resigning rather than be interviewed by your internal affairs team. To date, 8 former police officers, 2 defense attorneys, and a former paralegal have all pleaded guilty in federal court related to the DWI corruption scheme. The former ringleader, former defense attorney Thomas Clear III, admitted in court that this scheme dates back to 1995, right when you came out of the academy. No one has been sentenced yet as of this recording, and the U.S. Attorney's Office isn't really telling us when that could happen at this point. But, you know, you were an officer for a big chunk of this time. I know we've asked you before, but just looking back and to get it on record, you know, had you ever heard that this was going on in the DWI unit? And what was it like also to be chief at a time when officers were losing credibility like this in our community?
You know, it was, without a doubt, I will go back, look 31 years. The spring of 2024 is probably the roughest stretch of my career. And, you know, as I head into retirement, I think that, you know, one thing the other day, me and Mayor were having a conversation, and I said, you know, Mayor, it's not every day that a chief gets to retire and he considers the mayor his friend. And they leave happy with one another. And I credit Mayor for staying strong because there was a lot of criticism. The DWI scandal had just broke out. I unfortunately get involved in a traffic accident, and we all know it happened. And the amount of scrutiny that came about me at that point in time, a lot of mayors would have just said, I'm going to cut my losses for my own selfish reasons, and I'll figure stuff out at the department. But Mayor had the foresight. He knew we were moving in the right direction with DOJ. Everybody knew we were moving in the right directions with homicide investigations and clearance rates, and our crime was starting to trend down, and he stood his ground. But it was a very difficult time personally for me on the department, my family, and it was a very difficult time just looking back and reflecting on some of the officers who had been, that I knew were involved, both publicly already announced and those that we suspected because of the data we're looking at, and just the disappointment. Like, it was a low part, very low part for so many reasons. Like, we took an oath to this office. But the one thing is, I never knew anything was occurring, but I looked back and I reflected of some of these individuals and their close relationships with attorneys. And I think that's where it started, is they became such close friends that it blurred the lines of our job and theirs. And corruption never starts with, here's a bag with $5,000 cash, go dismiss this case. We learned a lot of these cases begin with, hey, can you help my client out? Then something came, oh, thank you for helping him out, they were a good person. And then eventually it just evolved to flat out, hey, help my client out. Here's some money. And I think that those officers just, they never recognized the slippery slope they were on. And I feel bad because you devote your career to fighting crime, to taking people to jail, to upholding justice. And the rest of your life, these people are going to live out that, in a way, it was a lie, that what they did is going to overshadow anything great they did in their career. And it's just so heartbreaking for them, for their families. And I know some of the cases, I know some of the specifics that still aren't public, and just the amount of money that people traded their integrity and their careers for is just mind-boggling to me at times.
Yeah.
You were publicly forthright that you had nothing to hide with this investigation and that you were cooperating with the feds. Mayor Keller, as you mentioned, he also backed you up, saying he trusted that you'd put a stop to corruption within APD had you known about it. While all of that happened, and I feel like it's good block chunk of information, and this is somewhat related, but not entirely. We did notice during the mayoral campaign season, you were definitely less in the public eye. We haven't seen you quite as much out there. Was that strategic at all for the mayor around this time? Did you have a conversation about maybe stepping back and not being quite as publicly facing during this campaign season? And was there ever a conversation about, deciding that you'd ultimately step back after the election, regardless of the outcome?
Regardless of the outcome of the election, I was leaving this next year. I've been very fortunate. I just am blessed. I not only rose through the ranks of the Albuquerque Police Department, I rose through the ranks of major city chiefs. I rose through the ranks of chiefs nationally, and I've been given an opportunity to advance training for chiefs and deputy chiefs nationwide. And I will be working in a field where I help develop chiefs, I help develop deputy chiefs, we help develop departments. And for me, that is a great transition at this point in my career. And every indication is, every conversation me and Mayor have ever had is I was going to leave this year. I mean, if you look at it, I at 99% para. Unfortunately, our state doesn't have a drop program where people can stay longer. And also, some things have changed in the past few years. Like my youngest daughter moved out, got married, moved out. And a lot of times I go to work, I go to trips, and my wife stays home alone. And if there's one thing I value is, like, I've been married 27 years, love my wife. And I also felt that it was time that I be a husband, I'd be a dad. Yeah. Because so many of those things take a back step to this job. So, yeah, there are a few things that I wish I could go back and do better. But it's a good time. It's a good time. And now, as for stepping back during the election, I still think I'm in the media a lot. I mean, get a little emotional there when you think of your family and everything they go through. But no, I mean, I'm still consistently in the media with Mayor. We just did, we've done homicide, our success on homicides, auto theft. A lot of times I was in the media for major incidents for DOJ. I mean, every quarter there was a big DOJ news conference, every court hearing, everything. So some of those opportunities have reduced, but there's never a conscientious effort like, oh, we're going to reduce the amount of visibility. I think it was the opposite. Every time Mayor had the opportunity to join one of our press conferences on our successes, he joined us. And I still think that, but at times also, I let Deputy Chief Barker and others, Deputy Chief Vega, step in to the role and handle the press conference. If you've noticed, I was absent from more officer-involved shootings this last 6 months than ever before. Mm-hmm. But somebody has to carry. And it would be very selfish of me to say, hey, I'm going to do this till the end and never give people I want to have the opportunity to have this position in the future the chance to start learning when somebody else is still here to give them advice. So, yeah, there are ways that I've given some of the duties that I do to some of my lower level staff, not lower level, but some of my executive staff, so that they could get the experience and be prepared to successfully keep moving this department forward.
Yeah. You mentioned your wife, because I was actually going to bring that up because you've said this to us before, that your wife's ready for you to be done
yes.
and retire, because you've retired before.
Yeah.
So, was there a moment that you can point to personally where you're like, all right, now's a good time. Like, I want to still retire. I want to do X, Y, Z, or did any of it start to feel like too much or too political? Because you mentioned like 2024 was a really rough year.
I didn't mind the politics. I knew they played their game, we played our game. I'll be honest, the only time it really bugged me was at one point in time somebody tried to terminate me off false information. Mm. And they put paperwork. And I was upset about that. Just because I could understand the bantering. I bantered with counsel all the time. They bantered back. That's normal business. That's everyday stuff. when somebody tries to impact your career, that's a little bit different. And when you have an afterlife and things live in the internet land forever, it is very disappointing that we're not cautious and careful about that. But there was nothing ever political that really made me feel like, oh my God, the politics are too much. It's like I said, it's a game. They play their games. Like I stood in how many city council meetings where they'd ask me, Chief, would you need more money? Knowing if I said I needed more money for my budget, it was going to come from another city department. And I always, nope, I'm fine. You know, I was a good co-department director and stuff. So I think the thing is like, as doors opened, obviously getting through the consent decree opened doors. As doors opened with being president of major city chiefs and opportunities arose themselves. When I found an opportunity where I could continue to give back to the profession and continue to help the profession across the country, I viewed it as a good way to kind of step back but still be involved in a profession that I love so much, still giving to the profession. But at the same time, I realize that organizations sometimes need change to continue moving forward. And, you know, with Mayor and the group of deputy chiefs that I've left, I think it's a good opportunity for one of them to bring their twist to the department and to move the department forward in a new way.
Do you foresee any of those leaders that we have seen, say, show up at the news conferences? I know Cecily Barker's been out there. George Vega was over at a news conference just the other day speaking. And there's been other leadership folks. Do you foresee any of them potentially moving into your role?
I do. I really hope that occurs. I do agree there has to be a search for community reasons. I mean, I think the community has to know that there were choices and they were options. But the one thing I would tell you is it would be shocking for an internal candidate not to be the best candidate. Mm-hmm. For one reason, I succeeded and navigated so many things. And I was able to accomplish so many things because I had 25 years of relationships to lean on. You know, I will tell you one of my best relationships, one of the people who helped me the most, Diego from the governor's office. You know, me and Diego are close friends. And I knew every time that I needed assistance from Santa Fe or I needed help that I could pick up the phone and he was a phone call away. I was like, hey, bro, need some help with this. Not only that, I mean, Raul Torres, over the years, just being able to pick up the phone and say, hey, Raul, bro, I need this. Can you help me? Can we work together on this? All those relationships helped APD be successful. Mm. And an outside person isn't going to have those lifelong relationships. You know, when Hector was at the Attorney General's office, it was the same thing with the AG's office. You know, I knew Hector when he was a prosecutor and I was a brand new officer. Mm. And he worked for the DA's office. He used to joke that I was probably the only case he ever won. And you know, the funny part is it was a DWI case. So, so having those relationships for so many years leads to success. And that's where I think an internal candidate will always outshine anybody externally trying to come get this job, because those relationships equal success. Because it is. I think one thing we did good as a police administration is we worked our partnerships very well. Look, the DWI case in point. Mm-hmm. Who was the only agency that worked with the FBI and that was trusted and that had communication? I knew stuff going on that nobody else knew, and it benefited us. It hurt us at the beginning because I was taking a rash of criticism that it was APD when I knew it was going to involve other agencies, and we just had to sit back, me and Gilbert, and bite our tongue and listen to people about how horrible only APD was, and then slowly everybody else got caught up underneath it. Yeah. And it's still not done. There'll still be more people identified.
Yeah. We'll be right back with more of the New Mexico News Insiders.
KRQE News 13 investigations. One of the biggest cons in New Mexico history. How did they get away with it?
Well, they had an accomplice. The state of New Mexico.
A road rage encounter leads to murder.
I miss him every single day.
Did the judicial system fail here?
New Mexico's families, homes, and lives are left in ashes.
There's a level of anxiety.
FEMA
has been an abject and abysmal failure.
Watch anytime on krqe.com or our YouTube channel.
So you've been through your share of controversies, I think, as we've talked a little bit about. You mentioned one of them, that being the crash that happened. It was a serious car crash. As you had mentioned, you were evading gunfire along Central. I know we saw the surveillance video images of what that incident was and who the person was that y'all were looking for. Your car crashes into a Ford Mustang. It seriously injures the driver. A full disclosure here at KRQE, the driver who was involved in that crash actually used to work at this station, but did not at the time of the crash. We know there is a pending lawsuit in this case, so I imagine you are limited in what you may or may not be able to say. But just to ask you, is there any part, when reflecting on this timeline, reflecting on what happened, any part of that situation that you wanted to address publicly?
No. I think that from the very beginning, I took ownership. I said, you know what, this happened. It was an accident. I had a decision to make, get my wife out of the way. There's never any ill intent. And it will take its course through litigation. As we all know, we're in a society that loves litigation. And it will get resolved, but there's never any intent to purposely do anything to anyone. The one thing I would address is, it's unfortunate. There's a victim on one side. There's, my wife, she took it hard. I mean, she was involved in it, and I was involved in it. We have a victim, and it is just actually disgusting how some people took advantage of a situation for their own benefit, and how they didn't care what they did to all those involved, that it was an opportunity to take a shot at the chief, to take a shot at the administration. And if there's one thing, I leave here hoping, I hope that everybody kind of sits back and remembers why we all do the jobs that we do. And that maybe sometimes we need to do the right thing for the situation and not the right thing, what we perceive as the right thing for our political advancement.
Yeah. To be clear, we've mentioned some of the controversies, but we've also highlighted a lot of good things while you've served as police chief at APD, particularly the rate at which APD was able to increase solving murders, tracking suspects, and using technology to solve a lot more cases. Within, 30 years in law enforcement, I can't imagine the technological advances you've been able to witness as a law enforcement officer in policing. I'm curious, what type of tech has surprised you most, or you think, man, I really wish I had this earlier in my career?
There's so much. And I think in 2025, beginning of last year, the Journal did that story, an editorial, and they said, 2024 is probably the best year APD has ever had. And they listed all the reasons why. And when I look at this year, we outdid that last year in every sense. We have a real shot of coming in under 70 homicides. We've cleared 134% clearance rate. That means we've cleared more cases, homicide cases, than we've had this year. We're clearing backlogs. We've going to hit a record number of arrests, record number of misdemeanor citations. In every sense, we're setting new benchmarks. So, but technology is a big piece of this, but it's not just technology. It's building the right team and having the right leadership and the right pieces of the puzzle. And it changes over time. I will tell you, two instrumental people in homicide that I love, Kyle and George. George Vega and Kyle Hartsock made a good team, and they built a good team, and they got results. And we've carried that through with George Vega now and Jeff Bernard. And it's about building a system. And our technology wouldn't be where it is now without Deputy Chief Griego. I mean, JJ goes under the radar so much, and JJ's retiring at the end of this year also with me. But JJ was such a big part, but he never got the spotlight. But that's how JJ operated. But you look, like there's so many great pieces of technology. The license plate readers in the police cars. First week, we got a homicide offender off of one.
Wow.
Our ability to integrate technology through Peregrine, our ability to use ShotSpotter to generate shell casings, our ability to use NIBIN to match shell cases to different scenes. The technology dump that has hit the APD is the best it's ever been. But it was also team effort. We got money from the state legislature. And as critical as I might be at the state legislature sometimes, I have to overall say, there's so many of them that are so supportive. Yes, it gets lost when we have a battle over a piece of legislation we want forward and we're fighting with one senator, maybe from the South or something. But it's politics. It's the course of how things go. But if you look at our local metro area legislators and how much they invested in the police department over the last few years in Capitol, it's unreal. They helped move the needle. Even with council, as much as we bicker and play politics and fight, at the end of the day, they all stepped up and we got funding and they helped us move forward. The mayor invested in the department. We're one of the best paid departments. And when you look at overall compensation, without a doubt, we are. It's been team efforts, and it goes back to what I said earlier, having the relationships within the state to be able to bring people together, to be able to have conversations. Javier Martinez, I knew him when we worked on an advisory commission for underage drinking way back in the early 2000s. It goes on and on. You know, you look at so many of our state legislators and some of our politicians and the long-term relationship that I've been able to have with them over the years, and the ability to go speak with them and talk to them has just been invaluable.
Yeah.
So we talked about how this episode is going to publish sometime after we do the interview, right? It's December 5th right now. We are just a few days out from the runoff mayoral election. But you've said regardless of that outcome, you're retiring. So what is next for you?
You know, I kind of alluded to a little bit earlier. I have the opportunity to help train and develop chiefs nationwide and to help departments that are struggling in certain areas. And I'm going to take advantage of it. You know, the goal is we have a leadership academy that will be at a West Coast college every spring, and a leadership academy that will have a second session at an East Coast college in the fall. And the time between, I will be working on organizing peer exchange programs for different departments. It was very successful for APD. If you look at our homicide and how we talk about technology, leadership, but one of the first things we did is we sent our homicide team to see how Las Vegas Metro did their homicides, because they were very successful at their homicide investigations. And they came back, and our people learned a lot of good things from Las Vegas Metro. We did the same thing with Miami and robberies. And we've sent people all over. And when I was in Major City Chiefs, one of the things we did is I developed a peer exchange program with 7 agencies on the East Coast and the West Coast: Miami, Tucson, Sacramento, APD, Long Beach. And each one gave a list of what their department did best. And I would send people to Tucson also, to LASO, and to different agencies. And that's what we want to do again, is create a network nationwide where you could send people to different areas. So that's what the next step is going to be for me. It is, like I said, I still get to give back to a career that has been so good to me. I get to do it at a national level. I still get to see all my friends chief-wise nationally, because one of the things is I will go to all the conferences and still get to socialize and see them, every few months at a different conference. So that's what's next for me for a period of time. And, eventually, hopefully over the next several years, it could become a more and more reduced load, because there's so many things that I gave up in life during this time to be the best chief possible. You know, we talked about it a little bit. Like, you sacrifice your family a little bit. I love to hunt. And I go to hunts late. I come home early. I'm on the phone the whole time I'm there. I love to fish. And you don't know how many fishing trips I've canceled because something's come up because of work.
Yeah.
And somebody asked me recently, like, why are you going to retire? And I tell them, when you understand this, you'll know why I'm going to leave. I'm Harold Medina, the chief of police of Albuquerque, not Chief Harold Medina. And when you understand what I'm saying, you realize this position never will be the only identity I have in life and the only thing I have in life. And it makes sense. It's a good time for me to move forward. Like I said, like I told Mayor, how many chiefs and mayors go different ways and actually like each other. Okay. And that is a big deal. I could tell you, looking back in APD, when's the last time a chief left without major drama or controversy or crime spikes or anything? So it's a good time. And I also see the importance of mentoring other chiefs because, you know, there is one person I want to give special credit to is like, now that I retire, I tell all of my staff, you call me, I'm here to help. You'll never see me publicly criticizing the decision they make. I may call them in private and say, think about doing this way, this time. But of all the retired chiefs at APD, never had one pick up the phone and call me and say, hey, chief, you want to go have coffee and talk? Oh, I got requests and people ask for me to do things, but never that just personal phone call of how can I help? But I give credit to one person. You know, every time I've seen him, he's been positive. He gives me great advice. Pete Casetas. There is no more classy person than Pete. Every time I've seen Pete, we have discussions, and he's given me some of the best advice I've seen. The same thing with Robert Luna, the sheriff of LA County. Robert has been that rock for me, that every time I need something or something's wrong, I know. I text him at 8 in the morning, and when his drivers pick him up about 8 his time, I'll be getting that phone call, and he will guide me through some of the difficult decisions I may have or give me his insight. He's one of the first ones I called. He actually is the first one I called for National Guard on how we were going to launch it out. So I want to make sure that I continue to give back to the profession and I help leaders succeed.
Yeah. Well, shout out to former state police chief Pete Casetas. We know he sometimes listens to the show. So, yeah, I'm sure he'll appreciate those high praise. We mentioned, you know, what you're most proud of. I'm sensing that part of your regret, though, is just that lack of family time you have in a job like this.
Yeah.
Over the 30 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, you just, it is. Like, I could tell you, like, I once got up and left my mom's birthday party as we were having dinner because we had an officer-involved shooting. And it was in the Southwest, I still remember. And this was probably about 2012. I literally, me and my wife have pulled into restaurants. We once pulled into the parking lot of the Monte Carlo and we're getting out of the car to go in and eat, and the phone rang. And I'm like, hey, babe, I'm going to drop you off at home. We'll get you some fast food. And I'm on the way to an officer-involved shooting. You know, though, I did say no last year. There was an officer-involved shooting on my wife's birthday. And I called Gilbert and I said, Cecily's going to handle this. I'm at dinner with my wife. So later I learned to push back, but I think one of the strengths I had as a chief, and the biggest compliment I get from people, because I walk through stores and people are so nice. They're so grateful. But one of the biggest compliments I get is people say, I appreciate how you're always in front and you're transparent and you're honest. And even with the media, what other chief has ever come and done, you know, once a year I come and sit with everybody for 1 hour, every station, 1 hour of just off the record conversation. And I think that the community needs to view a chief as being in charge, but you can't be in charge if you're not there and you don't show up. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the most important things. So it does take sacrifice from your personal life, but in the end, is it worth it? Yes, absolutely. I've loved it, but you have to recognize when it's time.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're excited about the future of being able to spend a little bit more time in your life outside of policing, but also that new opportunity to carry forth some of what you've learned and helping other chiefs out there. Just any words of advice that maybe you have for the next chief? Any resolutions for yourself?
I think, if I had to tell the next chief one thing is, number one, recognize the game of politics. Like, it's not as bad as you think. Like, people are going to, it's not the end all. It's a game. View it that way, and don't let it get to you personally, and just remember, don't take your eye off the ball. And the ball is make the city safe, make sure cops are happy, make sure the public trusts law enforcement. You accomplished those three things. You accomplished what a chief needs to do. Make sure your officers see you. Make sure that you show up to those big incidents. Make sure the community sees that you are the chief, that you are in charge. Leave no question. Create an environment where officers feel heard. That chief's breakfast is of the utmost importance. I tell officers, I was 14 years on this department before I ever got to talk to a chief. This morning, an officer with 1 year told me what he thought the department was doing well and about his family. That is a big shift and change that I hope carries on.
Where do you guys go for those breakfasts?
We have them at the chief's office.
Oh, okay.
We just bring in burritos, and we sit around a table and we take notes. And some of our biggest changes have come from that. I don't have the ability to know what's going on at the ground level because a chief is so busy every day. I'm like from place to place to place to place. Mm-hmm. And these meetings keep me in touch with the ground level of the struggles they're having. Because trust me, by the time their struggle hits a sergeant, a lieutenant, a commander, everybody's put their twist on it and watered it down to lessen their responsibility for whatever is going wrong. And hearing it firsthand from the officers makes a whole world of difference. So,
I imagine, yeah. Well, let's end on a lighter note, Chief. As we mentioned, people will be hearing this at the end of 2025. Have you thought about any New Year's resolutions for yourself as you step into this new role?
One of the things that definitely for me, my health suffered from this. Like, I'm heavier than I've ever been, and you don't get to work out the way you want if you can't stay on a good, consistent schedule. Like, every time I think, like, I work out 3-4 days, and then all of a sudden I have all these early meetings, late meetings, and just everything goes the sideways. And then all of a sudden you have 4 work lunches and a work dinner, and you're eating horrible, and it falls apart on you. My New Year's resolution is I want to be healthy. I want to work on my health, and I just want to kind of take a breath. Like, even recently now, a lot of times I go to the range on Saturdays, I shoot, and there's always, like, for me, there's always this rush. Like, I got to get this done. And lately, I've caught myself and I've said, you have time. Yeah. Don't be in a rush. Take your time. And so many times I'm finding myself reminding myself that there's not a rush anymore. Take your time, you're fine. And I think that is the number 2 resolutions I have next year is take a breath, realize there's time, and take care of myself, take care of my family.
For sure. Any other closing thoughts you wanted to say?
No, overall, I'd like to thank KRQE. You guys have always been a great partner. We've had a lot of discussions. We've had a lot of trust, if you think about it. We've done a lot of embargoed interviews over this time. Like,
this is one of them, yeah.
This is one of them. I mean, we did one on DWI.
Yeah.
And we've had trust and strong communication with one another, and I think it only benefits the police department's ability to be transparent to the community and to be honest. And I also want to just thank the citizens of Albuquerque. They're great. You're never going to keep everybody happy. Let's admit that. But there are so many people that are just so supportive and always out there and, always helping our officers. Not just me. I mean, like, There's so many people I see that pick up the tab for our officers' meals and give so many benefits to our officers and do what they can to support our officers. And I think that's important. It's a difficult job, and just seeing the day in and day out support of our officers is a breath of fresh air for us in Albuquerque that not all communities have.
Yeah. Well, Albuquerque Police Chief Harold Medina, the Albuquerque Police Chief.
Yes.
We appreciate your time and chatting with us. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Again, thanks to Chief Harold Medina for speaking with us and candidly, as we mentioned right at the top of this episode, about just some of the challenges he's faced over what he called the most difficult year of his career. And I guess it reminds you that whoever is headed into this role certainly will not be free from politics. It always seems to weave its way into the decisions they make because, as we know, crime is certainly the biggest issue for many voters still here in the city of Albuquerque.
Yeah, and I'm sure, the next police chief will face their own challenges that oftentimes we can't really predict what those will be.
Right.
But we always end up, seeing chiefs deal with one issue or another, whether that puts them in the spotlight or not.
I think the DWI scandal certainly was one of the biggest surprises in terms of challenges we've seen over the last few years, just to give an example.
Yeah. So we appreciate him coming on the show. We wish you all a happy new year from your New Mexico News Insiders, and we'll see you all in 2026. If you've got any story ideas or people you'd like to hear from on our show, always feel free and reach out. I'm Gabrielle.Burkhart@krqe.com via email and GBurkNM on social media.
I'm at Chris McKee TV, also Chris.McKee@krqe.com. Thanks for watching and listening.